So the idea here is across the cut, we would have this problem. In shot one, if the lamp was jumping, it would be firing off in this direction. Then when you cut the camera, it would go this way. So for your eyes, it would be very abrupt a ricochet. It would introduce some noise. It wouldn't be that pleasant for you to follow. So what we're trying to do is use the movement, the general movement, which is down, to bridge the two, so that the movement of the character going down and they reach the anticipation pose in shot two and actually jump in shot two, as opposed to jumping in shot one. So this is an important thing that everybody has to follow along with. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
So you do not want to have the lamp jump in shot one. It will cause an issue when you cut across. So this is just called cutting on action. The other thing that you have to think about as well is when the audience sees the character in this pose, and then we cut over here, if the character was in a different pose, straight up like this, all of a sudden there'd be an issue. Where in this frame, I see it in a pose like this, and then here it's like that. That's an issue that's usually called a match cut. So that means what you need to do is you need to match the first frame of this new scene, this new shot, has to match the pose here, or at least continue the action. So the way that we're getting around this is actually one scene file. It's one Maya scene file, but there are two cameras in it. And that's not typical for production, but for pre-production, it's very common. So when you're working in previs, it's very common to cover a lot of action with multiple cameras in one scene and kind of figure out the edit. And the tool that we're using to cut between the cameras is called the camera sequencer. And we'll look at that in more detail once we open up the files. But the camera sequencer in Maya, what this allows you to do is switch between cameras. So in Maya, you can actually go and manually switch. I want to look at camera one, I want to look at camera two. But the camera sequencer, what it allows you to do is basically create an edit like you would in editing software like Premiere or Windows Media, Movie Maker, right, whatever. You're able to sort of create clips. So you can create clip one and clip two, and you tell Maya which camera you want to use with each clip, and you tell it the start frame and the end frame, and it allows you to basically do some editing in a scene file with multiple cameras, so that you don't have to have multiple scene files and be opening and closing files and going back in to adjust one because of the other. So this is the camera sequencer. Okay, and we'll get into that in a minute. Now, some of the other things to pay attention to with this assignment is all of the same rules that we looked at last week for the lamp jump. How to pose the character, what makes the character feel like it's jumping, what makes it look like it's preparing, those kind of poses are all going to come in handy. The difference is that with the previous assignment, it was very two-dimensional. We had a fixed camera and the character was basically going in one direction, just across the screen. So we didn't have a lot of depth. But in this case, we have a bit more depth to worry about, which makes tracking the arcs a little bit more of a challenge when you're looking at just the camera, but all the same principles apply. Putting in your squash and stretch poses, tracking arcs, tracking spacing, making sure that you have the character moving. And again, a really big thing, don't kill this lamp, okay? Because it's not in the story, okay? Indiana Jones survives, right? So we want our lamp to survive. But for the director's cut, you can kill the lamp 10 times if you want. I don't care. Have fun. But for the assignment, I want you to follow the directions that we have here in this example fairly closely. So the ball is already rigged. And the way that we're going to figure out the speed of the rotation is to cheat and guess, just like we did with the other one. So I would start with 0 degrees and then go right to the end shot and try 360 and see how that works. And if that's okay, great. If that's too much, then I'll try 180. And if that's too slow, okay, then I'll try 270. So we're just going to try to eyeball it. We don't have to worry about being perfect, okay? And the ball is actually one of the easiest things to animate in this, but there are a few things that we have to follow. So what happens is you might notice there's a camera shake. Can everybody see that the camera shakes? Boom. That's something you can't change. If you get a scene file and it has camera stuff in there, you are supposed to match the camera. Any animator that goes changing the cameras is going to get in trouble because the camera has been set by the previs supervisor, the layout supervisor, and the director. So they've already planned it out, and your job is to try and squeeze the stuff that's supposed to happen in there. So that gives you a marker. You know that that frame is exactly when the ball hits the ground. So that gives you some timing. And then what you do is you just wait until your lamp escapes certain depth, and then that's the frame that you use to block in the end position of the ball. So you basically have like 2 or 3 keys. You have the start position up here, you have this position here on the ground, and then you have the end position for the ball, right? Once the lamp is cleared, okay? So the way you would block this in is I would block in the lamp first, and then I would worry about the ball. Okay? With this assignment, you're gonna have 2 weeks. So week 1, right, which is this week, technically let's call it week 6, we're gonna do the work in progress blocking. And we're gonna do that in stepped mode. And again, I'll talk about in that more detail once we get into the demo. And then in week 7, right, we're gonna have the work in progress is going to be checked. I'll give notes. And then week 8, you submit the final. And that's usually Wednesday, week 8, 9 p.m. And if we look at our calendar, I can pull that up. Here we are, week 6, 7, 8. So that would be April 21st. And there are 2 submission deadlines, right? One is the work in progress, which is due next week, right? So we have class next Tuesday, maybe Monday, 9 p.m. that'll be due. And that's going to be stepped mode blocking. And again, I'll do a little demo of that. So basically what we're doing is the posing. We're posing out the action, mostly for the lamp. That's the biggest priority. And in the second week, we're going to work on how do we spline and clean it up. So when people say blocking in step mode, they mean we just want to see the key poses. And then when people say, oh, is it splined? They're usually talking, is it finished? Is it working? Is the animation done? That's what we're looking for submission, the final submission. With the first shot, you can see here in the example, shot 1 is from frame 1 to 57. Shot 2 is going to start at frame 58. So the next frame is going to be 58, but you can see because it's a separate video, right? That's frame 1. And it will end, well, whenever you get the lamp out of here. So you can see here it's about, about 60 odd frames, maybe 70 frames. So you could look at that and say, well, okay, if that's the frame, then I just have to add 70 to that. So another 50 would be 108, another 20 would be 128, 128, 140, somewhere in that range. So there's no precise number for the end frame. You need as much time as you need to get the lamp out of here. But again, what we want to avoid is changing the story. There's nothing in the reference clip that shows Indiana Jones falling down, crawling on all fours and stumbling again, and then looking at the camera, right? That's the director's cut. So I know everybody wants to, okay, did you do this? Can I try this? Of course you can, just don't hand it in. Do that as the director's cut. Do the assignment first because that's the story. So when people have arcs that are kind of triangular, that are very sharp, and the spacing is very even and there's no change, it doesn't look very interesting. It doesn't look like anything's falling, okay? So timing, spacing, and arcs, and then the posing of the character are really important for this assignment.